Hi everyone, this is a video lesson on the AQA-A specification for psychology. Today we're going to be talking about Unit 1, mainly cognitive psychology, and more specifically short-term memory, long-term memory, and the duration of short and long-term memory. So, first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what is memory? Memory is basically when you can keep information about past events and facts in your brain. A fancy word for keep, which examiners would like you to write, is to retain. So remember that, keep is retain. Now, short-term memory is memory about the present and immediate past. So, for instance, memory about what I said at the start of this sentence. That obviously is helpful. Long-term memory is memory about the distant past. So that's going to be the memory that you use when you're taking your exam. You have to remember this and write it down. So that's going to be a long time from now. Hopefully you're not writing the day before the exam. Okay, so in terms of the duration of short-term memory, there's a big study that you have to know about. It's Peterson and Peterson, 1959. They made it easy with the name, Peterson and Peterson, husband and wife. 1959. Try to remember that day as much as you can. And basically, their study was all about how rehearsal affects the duration of short-term memory. So there you go. Just for you to understand this now, just for anything to go into long-term memory, it first needs to go into your short-term memory. So remember, right now you need to be rehearsing, and hopefully this will all stay in. So let's talk about Peterson and Peterson, 1959. What exactly did they do? Basically, their participant sample was 24 university students. It's very easy for psychologists to use university students because most psychologists work in universities. So when they're going to do a study, they just go outside to their campus and they ask people, will you do this for me? Not in every case, of course, but in a lot of studies, that's what happens. So they presented their participants with a consonant syllable and a 3-digit number. So LBL 142, for instance. That's not something that they actually use, by the way. It's just an example. And then participants were asked to count backwards in threes from the number that was just given. So 142, they'd have to go 139, 136, and so on. And this was to stop them rehearsing it, because obviously you don't have to even say it out loud to rehearse it. You can say it in your head and rehearse it. So to stop rehearsal, they told their participants to count backwards. Each participant had 8 trials, and the trials ranged from 3 to 18 seconds. That was the retention interval, which was the time taken between them being shown the nonsense trigram, LBL 142, and then asked to recall that. So it was free recall, which just means you just remember it off the top of your head. After you count down in threes for 3 to 18 seconds, you just remember it in your head. So the retention interval went in threes. It was 3 seconds or 6 seconds, and so on until 18 seconds. What they found was that in terms of 3 seconds, people remembered it 90% of the time. What they remembered was right when the retention interval was 3 seconds. When the retention interval was 18 seconds, they remembered it correctly about 2% of the time, which just shows that obviously our short-term memory would be 18 seconds max for, probably really good people. Now this is all AO1, so this is where you get your descriptive points. So AO1. Now let's talk about the evaluation, which is AO2. So 24 is quite a small sample size. So you can talk about that. If the sample size is small, then obviously you have generalization issues. You can't generalize it to everyone else if you're only using 24 people, right? I mean, look how many people there are in this world, and you're using 24. That's not very acceptable. Also, there were university students. This is called a sample bias. Your sample is biased towards a certain population. That population is university students. Obviously, you're studying this right now. You know that as a student, you're required to remember so much stuff. Obviously, university students may be better than just other people at remembering things because they have to do it anyway. So maybe if Peterson and Peterson used a different sample, they'd find something different. Um, Also, in terms of validity, if you don't know, validity is basically how a study is measuring what it's supposed to measure. In this case, Peterson and Peterson claim to be measuring the duration of short-term memory. So in terms of validity, how well are they doing that? Now, they didn't even use real words, and in real life, well, not that this was in real life, but in day-to-day life, we are required to remember real words. We have, if we have a shopping list, we need to remember, oh, just get some bananas and meats and fruit. You don't get asked to remember LBL 142, not very often, right? So maybe this is just measuring the duration of nonsense trigrams in your short-term memory. There's also a contradicting study. The study was by Nan et al. 1999. If you don't know, fun fact, et al. Just means and others. So Nan and others. This is just to make it easy so that you don't have to, sometimes in psychology, there's like 18 people that do one study. You don't want to be writing that in your exam. So you just need to remember Nan et al. Now, they, as I said, Peterson and Peterson measured the retention, which is how people kept the words with free recall. So once the participants were shown the words and then counted backwards, they were then asked to just remember the word. Nan et al. Asked participants to reconstruct the word. Let me explain. This is what Peterson and Peterson would have shown you. They'd have been like, Bosh, LBL 142. Then they would have taken that away, asked you to count down, and say, now what did I show you? Do you remember? This is what Nan et al. Would show you after they showed you LBL 142. They'll show you they'll show you BLL 124, and they'll ask you to reconstruct it, put it back together. They'll say, what was shown to you at the start? And they had very different findings. They found that people could recall it correctly 73% of the time after 96 seconds. So they obviously are trying to argue that short-term memory can be 96 seconds long, which is completely not what Peterson and Peterson were trying to say. Either way, Peterson and Peterson's study was still pretty good because it really showed just that there is a duration to short-term memory. It's one of those pioneering studies. Now, in terms of long-term memory, this is said to be 2 hours to 100 years long. Okay, I don't know where 100 years comes from, but that's what literature tends to say. Now, a study for this is Shepard, 1967. Basically, they showed people 612 memorable pictures, and then an hour later, they asked them to point out those pictures out of well, not millions, but loads of pictures that some of them they hadn't seen and others that they had seen. And they showed almost perfect recognition in terms of, recognizing what pictures they had been shown. And then 4 months later, this was still 50%. So this obviously means that those memorable pictures stayed with them in their long-term memory for up to 4 months. There's another study by Barrick et al. 1975. Barrick et al. 1975. They studied 392 high school graduates, and they asked them to put names to faces of high school yearbooks. So maybe not so much in England, but in America they have yearbooks and they usually have a little photo and a quote and a name from the person. And participants were asked to put names to the faces, and they showed that 73% still showed accurate face recognition. So they put the correct name to a face 48 years later, even 48 years later, which shows that obviously long-term memory can definitely at least go up to 48 years. Now, this is a healthy sample size. 392 high school students is quite a lot. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's really hard to, you can imagine, to get loads and loads of participants for your psychology study. So that's a good point. But now, a not so great point is that maybe this study was only looking at the memory of faces. Some people are just really bad at remembering faces, but they're really good at remembering facts. This is different types of memory, so maybe this study is not as valid as it seems, as it appears. So, tell me how it went, guys. If you think this was good, and the next episode, stay tuned. We're going to be talking about the capacity and encoding of memory. If you like this, let me know. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And if you think there's anything I can improve on, let me know. Let me know if it's helpful, if it's not. Thank you.